Perfect. So we'll go ahead and get started on need to knows for the new Walmart supplier. I'm really excited to cover this information with you guys here today. I am Melodie Hayes, so I'm the VP of Marketing here at SupplierWiki. I'm going to be acting as your host. So as questions come in, I'm going to be taking them and pitching them to Allie. So if you guys are not familiar with Allie, she's our lead content coordinator here at SupplierWiki. All of the decks, the articles, everything that you guys see the SupplierWiki comes out with, Allie has touched and created, and so we're really excited to have her here to be covering all of that content with us here today. She has a really fun joke of being from Northwest Arkansas. You know, the supplier world is in her blood. So yeah, we're really excited to have her here today and have all of her knowledge here with us. All right. So our agenda for today, we're going to be covering how you can grow your business with Walmart, how you can minimize revenue loss, because that is a big thing that impacts, especially new suppliers. We've seen some new suppliers who come in, they're like, I'm so excited. I've started, receiving POs. And then they're like, whoa, why is half of my paycheck gone? So we'll be covering how you can minimize that and then just talk about some resources and trends in the industry. We will be taking questions throughout, but we will also have 10 minutes down at the end to cover any questions that we're unable to get to. Awesome. So just some quick FAQs, get this out of the way, some housekeeping. Will you get a copy of the slide deck? Yes, you will. We will send it to your inbox within 3 to 4 business days, as long as we're recording. So you'll be able to see this actual recording sent to your inbox with the slide deck, so you can share that out with your team. And then what's the best way to ask a question? So there's going to be 2 options down to the bottom of your Zoom. There's going to be a single chat bubble, and that's a really great place to put any conversation starters, or if we ask any questions that you are answering, throw it in the chat. But if you have a question, if you could use the Q&A, which is 2 little bubbles, that will just be a lot easier for us to manage, just because we do get a lot of questions usually in the webinars. And if they get thrown in the chat, then sometimes they can get lost. So use the Q&A, 2 chat bubbles if you have a question. Perfect. All right. So who is SupplierWiki? So if you guys are not familiar with SupplierWiki, just a quick little overview. We are a software company based in Northwest Arkansas, and we build solutions to help retail suppliers recover money that they might be losing due to compliance or fees or fines. We help with a lot of the major retailers as well as a lot of the smaller ones. So think Walmart, think Target, think Amazon, think Kroger. And we support over 400 different CPGs. So we've only been around for a couple of years. The growth has been phenomenal. We've been able to help with over $25 billion in retail impact, which is just great. And we would love to help you. If you're a supplier and you're interested in learning more about us, I'll send a link down at the right after this where you can book some time with us. But that's it. That's the only pitch. I'm going to hand it off to Allie and take it away.
Thank you, Melodie. Yes, so super excited to talk about new supplier 101. One thing I want to call out, SupplierWiki is has lots of solutions for different suppliers, and then out of that, you're sitting on a SupplierWiki webinar today. We're the educational arm of SupplierWiki, and we create lots of relevant content that is always free for suppliers. So we've got lots of webinars, articles, in-person events if you're in the Northwest Arkansas area, and other resources that are helpful for suppliers. But today we're talking about the basics of being a new Walmart supplier. So if you are an industry veteran, if you've done this for a while, this should be a lot of review for you. And we've got other resources that dive deeper into some of the related topics we're going to talk about today. So as we're going through the presentation, I'll call those out, and Melodie will give us a magical link to take you to some of those other topics that may be interesting for you to dive deeper into. But I'm super excited to talk about this today because getting into Walmart is a big deal. Whether you are a new company and you've got an innovative SKU and you finally got it on that huge volume retailer, the retail giant Walmart, that's really exciting, as well as maybe you have been working in the supplier world for a while, you understand CPG business, but this is your first time sitting on the Walmart desk on your company. So we're super excited to get into the different topics. And first, we're going to start with talking about growing your Walmart business and the pieces that come with that. All right, so the first thing we want to talk about is the table stakes, which is logging into Retail Link. If you're not familiar with what Retail Link is, this is the supplier portal that Walmart uses to give basically suppliers access to everything that they could possibly need in terms of the apps, to look at replenishment, to look at some of your compliance issues. You can probably find it here, and if not, you can talk to your Retail Link admin, or you can talk to your Walmart team and they can get you to where you need to go. But today we're going to talk about the two main resources that are helpful for new suppliers to know, and that is Retail Link apps and how to find your supplier agreement. So we've got a couple green boxes. The first one in the middle that says apps. If you click that, you can see all of Walmart's apps, but as well as on the main page, there's that card that's also outlined that says apps, and that's your favorites. So a quick tip that we like to share is if you're always in Nova or Fixit or Squep, go ahead and click the star next to that when you're clicking into the beginning of the app on the apps page, and it'll actually pull it up to your home page here so you can access this really quick. And then another thing is that box on the right hand side, you'll see the little person profile next to the flag, and that is where you can find it's basically your profile, and then under that it will list your agreement, and that's how you can find your supplier agreement, which has a lot of pertinent information and is super easy to forget because, you know, suppliers sign that, they're great, they're working with Walmart, and then all of that 30-something page document kind of goes out the window in terms of storage in your brain. So that's a great place to refer back to. All right, and then here we go. Let's go to the next page. Like I said, if you click that profile icon next to the flag, it'll create a drop down that will list out your user account, how to change your password, your company profile, and then that fourth one to the bottom is My Agreements, and that's how you find your online supplier agreement. So there's a bold call out on the slide that says OSAs, which is online supplier agreement. They're no longer available through the OSA or GSM apps. And I've included this slide that gives kind of context to if you're a veteran supplier, if you've been in this business for a while, you know the Walmart business, but it's pretty key to remember the way that existing suppliers or Walmart team refer to things, because there's lots of acronyms and there's just lots of jargon that comes with that. So knowing that if they're asking for, you know, getting into the GSM app, this is where you can actually point people. It's no longer there. Our online supplier agreement is under the profile icon, which is actually a little bit easier because it's just, you know, accessible from the home page. And depending on your business, you may have several different supplier agreements. So you'll just need to click into the business unit that you want to see, so whether that's on your samswalmart.com business, and then it'll list out the different ones. If you have multiple SKUs or different lines, just depending on how your business is set up, you can download those PDFs. So really easy to find. And then I've kind of outlined this earlier, but if you're wondering what is a supplier agreement, I know I signed that document a while ago, but I'm not exactly sure what all it pertains, and I don't want to read 30 pages of legal jargon. It is legal. It's a legal document that binds you to Walmart supplier standards, and we actually do have a webinar that kind of outlines all of those. And we go into detail on some of the ones we want to call out to suppliers. I believe that is accounting with Walmart, and I'm sure Melodie can tag that in the chat for you to look at. We've got recordings of that one, as well as we do it on a monthly basis. So call out on all the different topics in your supplier agreement, but essentially this is going to adhere to anyone supplying product to Walmart and any agents used by suppliers. So if you're using a third party to ship transportation, they also have to adhere to Walmart standards, regardless if they are actually an entity that is owned by your company or not. All right. And then now we're going to talk a little bit about getting apps in Retail Link. So like I said, you're on the home page and then you just click on the top nav and click to apps and you'll get a whole page of applications. And it's a little overwhelming, but we're going to call out some of the key ones that you should be looking at. Depending on your role, talking to your Walmart team or to your internal team may be helpful to point out what's right for you. But generally across the board, we're going to talk about some of the ones that we see suppliers asking a lot of questions about, having issues with, but also really important tools to leverage. Another thing, if you're a new supplier and you haven't spent a ton of time in Retail Link, you may start to realize that Retail Link has a mind of its own and kind of decides when it wants to work. And one thing we want to call out is sometimes it's broken and you can't fix it, and that's okay. I know it's hindering, your processes and getting the work done that needs to be done. But checking in with some of the Retail Link help desks, or even joining a resource that we recommend to all suppliers on Facebook, which is the Walmart Supplier Support Group, and it's a community-led group, and you can commiserate on if your Retail Link apps are not working, if Retail Link is down as a whole. So it's really helpful to join that, just to know you're not crazy. Other people will post in there and give solutions for the various issues that pop up with a supplier portal being finicky. One thing we can say is clear your cache, your cookies, and your internet history so that you're getting the latest version of Retail Link. And sometimes that works. If not, I'm so sorry. Go check Walmart Supplier Support Group and see if there's an action there that you can take. But that's usually the first way to mitigate the problem. But let's get into some of the apps on Retail Link. There's a very long list, but here are 9 of the ones we wanted to call out because these are the ones we talk about with suppliers pretty often. So as you can see, we've got APDP, we've got On Time in Full scorecard for OTIF, we've got the SQEP dashboard, we've got an accounting scorecard, decision support, which can sometimes be referred to as DSS, Fix-It, APIS, which is Accounts Payable Inquiry System, Nova, and Item 360. And you can see we've got some screenshots of these that are starred. So when you click that start, that's what brings it to your homepage. But let's get into some of these apps that new retailers need to know. So we've bucketed these into the ways you would use them, and we're going to get into this in the other section as well. We're doing a high-level overview now, and then we'll talk about some of the compliance issues in detail and get into these apps specifically. So APDP, Accounts Payable Dispute Portal, pretty self-explanatory, Accounting Scorecard, and APIS, or Accounts Payable Inquiry System, are helpful for understanding, viewing, and disputing accounts payable deductions. And yes, you need to have basically all of these open at some point to go through the journey of disputing a AP deduction at Walmart. And we'll kind of talk more in depth on that in the next section. Another compliance program is SQEP, which is the Supplier Quality Excellence Program. And we'll talk about what that all entails, but essentially it is for supply chain defects. So that can be essentially anything under the sun. But these 2 apps are helpful for understanding the root cause of your SQEP fines. And important caveat here is, I know I said that Retail Link has everything you need to be a supplier at Walmart, all the information, but there's a third-party application outside of Retail Link that is for disputing these SQEP or SQEP fines. And then we've kind of listed these out too. This is the OTIF scorecard. So this is another compliance program, and it allows you to view some of the issues with on time and in full compliance. And this is also not for disputing. It's very similar to the SQEP scorecard. And actually, if you're in the OTIF scorecard, you can go up to I believe it's the right-hand corner, and it'll say SQEP scorecard, and you can transition between the 2, which is actually super helpful because you're not having to read a scorecard that's super different from each other. And OTIF and SQEP are kind of cousins in the compliance world. So it's actually helpful to look at these in tandem. So I really love that feature that Walmart's built in. But again, neither of these allow you to dispute. Both of them are in a third-party app called HighRadius, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And I'm going to pause here actually and just say we have, I believe, and Melodie can correct me if I'm wrong, but for all these apps, we do have at least a 101 guide kind of outlining some of the basics of using these apps. And I don't know if Melodie could share all of those. That might be a high order, but we've got content, especially on Item 360, Nova. We have the retail link recipes, which is for decision support. Got on time in full, OTIF content out the wazoo. We've got APU deductions content, SQEP content. So I'm sure she can link some of that. But again, just surf SupplierWiki and you'll find what you need. Melodie, did you have a question or a comment? I'm not going to make you share all those links.
I will definitely share at least one for each, and then I will share a couple for on time and full for you guys. So I will work on that right now, and you should be able to see it just in the little chat.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that. But as I was mentioning, we've talked a little bit about the OTIF scorecard. The next one is decision to support, or DSS. This is a reporting application, and we do have one on this because it is a little bit tricky to use. Lots of things you have to click to get an output, but it allows users to create custom databases, pull reports, and it is essentially kind of a hub of a lot of rich Walmart data that can help suppliers make decisions. So that's one I would definitely suggest checking out. And then the third one here is Nova, which I feel like I'm about to get quizzed, but we just had a webinar on it, and it's on PO management and maintenance. Oh, it says it right on the slide. I'm trying to quiz myself. It's new order validation and approval, and it is used for creating and editing and canceling and doing anything else that you need to do with a Walmart PO. A caveat here that I felt was important to call out in the last webinar we did on Nova is that this tool is kind of a baton relay race sort of tool. And what I mean by that is a supplier can have a conversation with your Walmart team, and then you can make edits in Nova based on your access capabilities. But you can also have your Walmart team make edits, and they have access to this app. So it's just a really important caveat to mention, because this tool is a place where you can really partner with your Walmart team on making sure that your replenishment, that you're having the best possible order management. So that's one tool that I really recommend to bring up when you are talking to your Walmart team. All right, and then the last one is Item 360. And maybe this should have been the first one, because this is how suppliers set up new products when executing product strategy, essentially for all omni-channel, essentially. I'm saying that because there's a lot of capabilities in Item 360. One of those being, you're setting up your new products, which can be a convoluted process, but you're setting them up for in-store, you're setting up the details for every portion in the supply chain process. This can affect everything from what's on your barcode label to what's displayed on Walmart.com. So we have a webinar on this. There's also some great training on Retail Link. So if you go to Retail Link, I'll actually go back just so we have a visual. If you go to Retail Link and you see that top navigation, you have Home, Apps, Docs, Feeds, Business, and then Academy. Academy is really helpful for finding those extra resources from Walmart. And if you go into Academy, you can actually find Item 360, and they've got lots of trainings and details that may be pertinent to setting up your items the correct way. Something I like to say about item 360, it's like cataloging a library book. So if you're getting the title wrong, if you get one number wrong on the barcode, you fill out a description wrong, no one's going to find it. And that's just a library book. Let's talk about your product on a shelf. If you can't find a product on a shelf, if at the DC they're not able to understand where this product's supposed to go, your product's going to sit there, and ultimately you're not going to be able to sell to your customer, and that creates a lot of issues. So item 360 is a great one to learn a lot about, have that down pat to avoid supply chain issues and ultimately compliance issues in the future. All right, so we've talked about understanding the Retail Link apps and a little bit about Retail Link, and now we're going to get into the basics of replenishment. And I wanted to talk about this, especially because we just finished discussing item 360. The basics of replenishment is a huge issue at any retailer you're working on. If you don't understand the nuts and bolts of replenishment, you're going to have supply chain issues, and ultimately you're going to have revenue loss due to those compliance programs. So with that, let's get into some basics of replenishment, starting with the pallet. So this is kind of where it begins. On item 360, you have your awesome product, that's the SKU or stock keeping unit, and you're ready to ship it off to Walmart. You're super excited. You have to think about the product on shelf and working it back to how you're going to get there. So some things to consider is, how does your product need to be packaged? If you are selling electronics, what are the requirements there? If you have, products that are going to be shipped, maybe they're not on a pallet, but direct to store, what does that mean? If you're shipping through, you have a smaller product that just requires a tiny box, no pallets, how are you getting that to the store? What shipment method are you using? How are you packing that so whoever is getting that out onto shelves or in the DCs, moving it to where it needs to go, how are they taking those eaches and breaking them down? So another thing to consider is how many of your products can fit on a pallet. So it's very backwards math. But essentially a pallet is 40 by 48, and that's the US standard. There's, I believe, only 2 or 3 major pallet creators, which, I'd love to know how you get into the pallet making business, but essentially just understanding the math of what will fit on there, what will be able to sustain whatever type of shipment you're using, whether that's truck or you're using FedEx or UPS if you have a smaller inventory item. Details like that are super important to remember, although they kind of get lost in the minutia of getting your product to the store. A couple other things is, how will it be parceled out? So in this instance, we have a master pack, an inner pack, and a SKU. Maybe you don't need all of those levels depending on what your product is, but it's super important to remember that with each of these, there are requirements for packaging, for barcode, how it fits on the pallet, stacking, and you can find all of those in the Walmart supplier. It's a very long title, Walmart supplier standards, I believe is what it's called. And it's a 200-something page document that lists essentially everything out that you need. My recommendation is, do not start on page 1 and read throughout. You will fall asleep on page 2. It's very detailed and honestly boring, but just clicking Command Find, searching through and typing barcode, seeing what pops up for that, reading through those, just so you are ensuring that your product is not going to be up for any compliance issues, whether that's OTIF, SQEP, deductions. So that's just one thing to consider there. And then kind of last, the cherry on top, I would say, so everything else we've kind of talked about is table stakes, avoiding revenue loss. But that last bullet point is, think about Walmart's initiatives. We'll get into these kind of towards the end in resources and trends, but you can actually be a Class A supplier by thinking about how the packaging is going to affect the new initiatives that Walmart's investing in when it comes to technology at DCs or for associates. And this can affect your businesses in two ways. You're a Class A supplier, you're getting no compliance fines, your supply chain is running smoothly, or you can just continue to feel like you're 2 steps behind. So being ahead of the curve is seeing where Walmart and other retailers are looking at, and updating your packaging and your product to successfully move through Walmart's supply chain. All right, so here's a quick visual about replenishment. Replenishment can kind of be a interesting strategy game to play at Walmart because of the replenishment management system. And there's kind of 2 ways to think about it. So there is a system generated replenishment at Walmart. Your POs are going to be generated. They kind of have an understanding. There's lots of math behind replenishment, but replenishment is an art and a science, and it gets affected by current events. It gets affected by mistakes made in the supply chain. So it's important, again, we're kind of talking about packaging here, to understand what needs to be on shelf and fixing up those holes. So here's 2 options. You can do pack and a half on shelf, which is, you're not using retail ready packaging. And you're going to have essentially a full pack, which in this case, we're doing 6. So that again goes back to kind of like what's in your pallet, what's in your inner pack, what is a SKU. So considering that for your particular product. So if you're, let's say in that box, a full pack is considered 6, you need to have also a half pack on shelf. And the reason for this is only dealing with replenishment. So they always want to have something to fall back on in the back of the store, essentially. Want to have units that are ready to go. And if a full pack has gone off shelf, that triggers instantly, hey, we need more replenishment here. This can also be an issue for phantom inventory, which I won't get in today, but we've got resources on that. And this is where the art comes in. So understanding where your replenishment for phantom inventory comes in, having other resources that can help you identify that, besides, Walmart being your quality control person and saying, hey, we're not receiving stock here. So there's lots of resources on that that we can share, but wanted to do a quick level overview here. Retail ready packaging follows the same thing, but it is a little bit easier to visualize because it's not this pack and a half rule necessarily. So if you have 2 on shelf, 1's empty, you want to have the system trigger for another one, so the shelf always looks full. It's pretty simple. We'll get into retail ready packaging here. So here are some of the bulleted out points. So if you are using retail ready packaging, which is also sometimes called PDQs or SRPs, the expectation is 2 can fit on shelf. So that comes to replenishment. We always need to have 2 on shelf, but also when we're building out these retail ready packaging, are we considering the shelf size? Are we considering, the reason why these are made, which is to help store associates shelve easier, quicker. So just really thinking about the user when you're creating these. And then when a store sells through 1, replenishment is automatically triggered. So thinking about the supply chain, and these should come in 2s they should come in 2s if your product is turning over fast. But if, let's say, your category, kind of sits there, you've got really nice headphones and you don't sell those through as much as maybe granola bars, then maybe you pick a different strategy. If you're not utilizing retail ready packaging, so you're doing more of the pack and a half rule or just single things on shelf, which would apply to the pack and a half rule, the expectation is that you build the maximum warehouse pack size that will allow you to fit 1.5 warehouse packs on the shelf. And when a store sells through the contents of 1 warehouse pack, that is when replenishment is automatically triggered for a new warehouse pack. And a thing to note really pay attention to what packaging is being asked for and tease out what the warehouse pack is versus the master pack, etc. Because this is where some suppliers make a critical mistake. We were talking about Nova the other day. It asks for how many warehouse packs you're trying to include in a new PO creation or edit. And if you're thinking in a different pack size, then you're going to automatically create an issue with that PO. And Walmart is going to find a way to fine you for that, because that is on the supplier for making that mistake, and they don't want to create any errors in their supply chain. All right, and now we're kind of jumping to the type of shipping method that you would choose. And we're jumping around a little bit because we've got lots of content on all of these, so you can find deeper things for retail ready packaging. You can find deeper knowledge for collect versus prepaid, but it's important to realize that all of these things work together. So if there's an issue with your collect and prepaid, there's probably an issue with replenishment, and there's everything kind of stacks up on each other, and that's how fines are created. So collect versus prepaid. Lots of new suppliers. Pick one or the other, or a mix of both, depending on your type of product, where you're located, the volume that you can produce, etc. And we've kind of listed out the pros and cons because both are great options. It just depends on what you are working with. So for collect, a supplier is actually not responsible for delivery performance. So if you're using Walmart Freight, you are essentially saying, hey, I want you to act as the party of the supplier with the supplier's interests, and get this product to where it needs to go. And that's really great because you don't have to worry as the supplier about the logistics that are going on, and then you're not liable for OTIF, on time in full, as much. Again, there can always be issues because if you are collect and you're not ready at the pickup time, you're still wrapping the pallet in saran wrap and Walmart Freight is there, you're going to get fined for that. Another thing with collect is there are cons to that. So you're going to have less visibility into transportation. It can be a little bit harder to dispute if you don't have access to some of that data. We have had suppliers in the past say, I don't have access to the POD, so I feel like I can't dispute when I'm collect. So there are obstacles there. You're not in control of those on-time deliveries. So that can be a conversation with your Walmart team of who's accountable for these issues that are happening. And then something we'll call out here in a little bit is the new additional fines that are tacked on to shipping collect at Walmart. Now for prepaid, this is when the supplier has the control in terms of they're responsible for getting the product there on time, whether that's to the DC or to the store. And you kind of have the flexibility to manage that, whether that is a pro or a con. So you can control the cost in this environment, maybe not as much with the truck driver shortage and some of the inflation costs that we've been seeing with gas. But if you feel like your 3PL, your third party logistics provider, is not up to snuff and is actually causing some of the issues with your on time and in full compliance, you can switch to someone that you feel is more reliable, and you're not stuck with the option of collect where maybe Walmart Freight is not performing. You actually can't switch to another collect. You're at the mercy of whoever is working for Walmart, whether it be Walmart Freight or third party working as Walmart Freight. And then the cons for prepaid I've kind of alluded to, but essentially you still hold the liability. So any damages, delivery time, etc., things that would pull into that, you're responsible for the outcome, whether that is a valid fine or not. You're left holding the bag. So that's just one thing to think about. And as I mentioned before, the Collect Pickup program is something that Walmart announced 4th of July weekend, which is a super fun way to celebrate that holiday. But essentially they said, hey, you guys have essentially a month suppliers that are shipping collect, and we're going to start charging fines that will be sent to you for all products shipped collect. And those 2 charges broke out into 2 different specific fees. And I'm saying the word fees because these are undisputable. We hear lots of terms like deduction, chargeback, fine, fee, and this is what Walmart called them, pickup charge, but it's actually not disputable. It's a additional fee. Think about it like Airbnb. You sign up for Airbnb and you can't opt out of the cleaning fee because that is tacked on to the service. So the 2 charges are the pickup charge, which is for it's essentially the valet service of like, hey, I'm here to pick up your freight. I'm Walmart, and it's going to be determined on the dollar amount percentage of the cost of goods by every item department every month. So I'll pause here and say, we have a list of all the percentages from August, and they range from like 0.05% for one department and like 5% for another department, and maybe even higher. I may be remembering that incorrectly, but it's all across the board, and it's supposed to change every month. We personally have not seen any changes there in terms of the cost of goods sold, and there's not a ton of visibility. So my recommendation to suppliers is to once you receive those charges, do a calculation and make sure they're right. Because I'll get into this in just a minute. Essentially, some of the charges have been wrong when they were distributed in September. That second charge is the fuel surcharge, and that's going to be based on the distance to deliver products from their destination to their final destination, plus the factor of current gas prices. And the company that's calculating this is called Breakthrough Fuel, a third-party transportation company. And it essentially takes lots of data, like real-time gas prices on the route of your particular products, with mileage and other route data that kind of combines into this fuel surcharge. So when these were released in September, we talked to a lot of suppliers, and there was lots of buzz on Walmart supplier support group. And we saw that a lot of suppliers were saying, hey, these are completely incorrect. Like, these are way higher. I don't know how they calculated this. I did my own math, and I'm looking at their math, how they got to that, and it looks a lot higher. So actually, Walmart took those fines back, and I don't know if they were distributed completely. Maybe that's a conversation that we can have in the chat if you are a supplier that received those. But there's a lot of double checking that needs to happen in this process because it is so new. So that's my call out to suppliers is if you are collect, you're stuck with this for a while. They say that this is, going to be the standard ongoing, but just keep checking Walmart to make sure that you're not overpaying in the collect pickup program. All right, so we've talked about understanding your retail link apps, basics of replenishment, talking to your Walmart buyer, and now we're going to talk about talking to your Walmart buyer. We're actually going to do an office hours on this particular topic with one of our experts, Stacy Tan, who has worked with lots of Walmart buyers. But essentially, when it comes to talking to your buyer, our blanket statement is your mileage may vary. So your buyer has authority, but is also a great partner to work with when it comes to making their lives easier. So they've got 500 plus emails in their inbox a day, and are under no obligation to solve every problem that a supplier has, but helping join in and solving those problems together, creating that partnership to make their lives easier is something that we would recommend to any supplier working with a new buyer or a veteran buyer. And then we're going to talk about getting into revenue loss here. So I'm going to kind of start that conversation off about how you talk with your buyer about that. So they're not under an obligation to help with your deduction claims. So keep in mind that reaching out to your buyer is best when you have a really solid case and you've gone through all the resources that you can, especially for like chronic issues or things that you feel like they can really help recommend. I'll kind of plug in. Processes change, and communicating and learning your buyer's language is really helpful. So if you're working with an older, a buyer that is more experienced, knowing that when they're saying, hey, can you send me that ISAM activity? And you're sitting there going, I don't know what ISAM is. That's actually item 360. So it's important to kind of understand maybe what they are referring to as things and processes have changed, and pulling them in when maybe they're not aware that, hey, this is the new process for OTIF. This is what we've been instructed to do. Like with OTIF, there is a new portion that when a fine is rejected on high radius, they send you a buyer template that essentially you can send to them and say, hey, we talked about this. Remember, I tried to dispute it in high radius, and now I have the opportunity for my buyer to actually waive this. So that's a super new process that not a lot of buyers know about. So it's just staying on top of things to help empower your team as well as your Walmart team. So with that, let's get into minimizing revenue loss. So here is a high-level overview of Walmart's compliance programs. So we've talked about these a lot, and you'll probably see this particular slide in a lot of our content because it's really important to tease out the differences of these programs. So AP deductions are accounts payable deductions. They're going to come off your check. They can be invalid, they can be disputed, and we do see suppliers win these with the right documentation. These are disputed in Retail Link through the app, APDP, or Accounts Payable Dispute Portal. If your buyer is talking about direct commerce, then they're talking about APDP. Direct commerce is the old program that still may exist on some suppliers' apps and has some data in it that I know some suppliers are going back and pulling, but moving forward, Walmart is using APDP. OTIF fines are different from AP deductions. They can also be referred to as AR charges that come in the form of fines to suppliers. So OTIF fines are delivery compliance fines. They're not shortage deductions. What they're saying is, hey, you promised to get this inventory to us on time and the exact amount that we asked for. So if you're out of compliance, something in that process is inhibiting on time and in full from happening. With OTIF, the disputes are kind of informal, and there's no specific formula if you dispute with your buyer, but now they can be disputed in high radius or with your buyer. And we're actually kind of teasing out some of those changes that are happening. I mentioned the OTIF buyback or template or payback template. So we've got lots of content on that, but essentially right now, try to dispute with your buyer if it is a large charge that you know you have documentation for. If not, it's going to hit on high radius as a fine. You can dispute it there. And if not, you'll get a rejection letter and it will be attached with a OTIF buyback template that you can go back to the buyer. I know it's really tedious, but that's the process that is in place as of now. And then SQEP fines are essentially the sister fine compliance program of OTIF. They're similar because they are also in the form of fines to suppliers, but they are related to packaging compliance fines. So there's PO accuracy. They're in 4 phases. There's PO accuracy, which is phase 1. There's barcode compliance, packaging compliance, pallet, load, quality, which is fines 2 and 3. And all of those are active as of today. Phase 4 has not rolled out yet, but word on the street is it's rolling out next year, early next year, and that is scheduling and transportation. So you can see how OTIF and SQEP kind of overlap in some areas, which brings me to the next bullet point. Fines from multiple SQEP phases can stack, and fines from OTIF, SQEP, and AP deductions can stack based on one PO. And we'll kind of tease that out here in a second. And again, OTIF and SQEP are pretty similar because both of them can be disputed, and the manual way to dispute that is through HighRadius, which is a third-party app, not on Retail Link. Okay, so here's a really quick visual. Deductions, so that's going to be your AP deductions, that's shortages, that's going to be your code 22, 24, code, etc. And that is a payment. So your payment from Walmart, if it looks a little bit smaller, it's because you probably got a deduction. Whereas a compliance fine is going to be additional cash that you need to give to Walmart because of a compliance issue. All right, and I kind of alluded to this, deductions entail any allowance codes, so going over your allowance, which is listed in your supplier agreement, pricing codes, merchandise codes, shipping codes, shortages, overages, etc. And then compliance fines is going to be under OTIF and SQEP. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about deductions. So I talked about this earlier. Here are the apps you have to use if you're going to dispute your AP deductions. They don't work for OTIF or SQEP unless you've successfully disputed a AP deduction, and then you're seeing that you're getting an on-time charge for something that is related to the same PO. Go back and look at some of your AP proof documentation and see if it can supplement your story for another compliance fine. And then here's a really quick breakout. And again, I know I'm talking fast and trying to get through the content because we're already to the question period. But my call out here would be that we have these, we're going to send the deck out, so don't worry. So this is an outline of what each of these apps do, and you'll need the dispute portal APDP for executing deductions. That's the one I really want to call out there. But accounting scorecard and APIS kind of supplement the proof documentation or understanding when you go into APDP. And then for OTIF and compliance fines, OTIF is going to expect a 98% fill rate. You can check that out on the OTIF scorecard. And if you're not compliant, it's going to be 3% of cost of goods sold. So that really starts to add up. They're disputable through HighRadius. And then our best practices are just forecast sales to anticipate what Walmart needs in the future, kind of back to that replenishment conversation, and then over communicate with your buyer, with your 3PL, with all the parties involved. And I'm going to skip this here, but we've got lots of great information on this in some of the other OTIF documentation that we have, and you will get this slide deck, so don't worry about screenshotting it really quick. And then just really sending this home of, if you're trying to dispute OTIF or SQEP, you're not going to have access on Retail Link. It's on HighRadius, and that's your dispute portal. You can get a login by requesting that through your admin or signing up on, if you search highradius.walmart.com, you can sign up through there. And then know your OTIF delivery windows. That's going to be the first way to mitigate any OTIF fines. If you have an MABD that is on a weekend and you don't, your company doesn't work on weekends, work to change that, because Walmart doesn't take days off when it comes to MABDs. So make sure that those are correct and working for your company as well as Walmart. SQEP fines, I went through this. PO accuracy, advanced shipment notice for phase 1. And then these are all disputable on HighRadius. We've got content that goes into all of this if you're curious. Then lastly, this is just acknowledging that there's a lot that suppliers have to juggle when it comes to Walmart's high aspirations. No out of stocks ever, especially with the pandemic. OTIF is 98%, SQEP, item swap and quick mods, which we're going to talk about here in a second. And then suppliers need to own every step of the supply chain. That's the expectation for Walmart. So we understand that fines, charges are just another thing suppliers have to juggle. And then I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but if you have a short shipment deduction, you can still get a SQEP fine and an OTIF fine. Walmart's not evil. They're just massive, and their programs sometimes, well, they don't talk to each other. So you can end up being penalized for one PO on several different issues. So don't let that happen, and make sure you have visibility on your team for what's happening across the compliance fines, and be ready to dispute separately if that is the case. One call out here, short deductions, AP deductions, short shipping deductions are disputable, SQUEP fines are disputable, OTIF fines are disputable, and then your collect pickup fees are not disputable. So if you're collect, that's one call out there for you. Okay, I'm gonna whip through this pretty fast too, but these are just the icing on the cake. You're a good supplier right now, but what if you want to become a great supplier? Some of the things to think about are what are retailers spending their money on? So Walmart's investing in lots of automated fulfillment. They have invested in Canoe, which is self-driving and EV trucks. Think about how you can plug into some of those initiatives. And then this is how Amazon and Target are doing those as well. These retailers are always going to follow suit and try to be competing with each other. So if Target's doing it or Amazon's doing it, Walmart may have already done it or is planning to do something similar. And then we'll skip this for now, but we've got lots of great content on this. You can find this in the conversation on this in the Decoded webinar about the future of deductions. And then quick mods. This is something that you should learn about right now if you're a supplier, because it essentially item swap, which is, hey, I can take one of my items and swap them out, or my buyer can use item swap and swap out a competitor's item. Quick mods is that on steroids. So we've got an article on this that Melodie can link, but this is how you go from being a good to great supplier or a good to not even in Walmart supplier. And we've got actually a recording with the senior director of space analytics at Walmart, who has walked us through this. And Josh Tubbs is his name. He's really great. He's helped us a lot, and he really wants suppliers to understand the initiatives that are available for them at Walmart. Last thing on Walmart updates. They're retiring settlement disputing. It's happening May 1st, 2023. We have an article on this that we just published. The news has come out pretty recently. Now they're suggesting bulk disputing, which is not necessarily a great solution. We get into that a little bit. It essentially diminishes your win rate because you're not able to attach proof documentation in bulk. At SupplierWiki, we have a couple solutions for that, but again, this is just something to be aware of as a supplier, that if your company is on a settlement by May 1st, that is no longer an availability for any supplier. All right. Sorry that I went over, but I will take some questions now, Melodie, if we have any, and we can stay a little bit longer if needed.
Ooh, so you covered so much information. That's so much. We actually only have one question, so we might actually be able to get out here a little early, unless you guys send questions in and there's anything else you'd like for us to cover. I try to send all of the resources that Allie's mentioned, so please check those out. Those are in the chat. But the question that we have is, buyers occasionally change. Is there an easy way to find out who our current buyer is?
Yes, Melodie, you may be able to speak to this too. I'll point to the SupplierWiki resource, which is Buyer Connect. We have some of the buyers there listed. If not, Melodie, what do you feel like is the best way to find that?
Yeah, I would Buyer Connect is a crowdsourced tool that we have inside of SupplierWiki. So you can go and check there and see if there's any new contacts. If there's not, I would suggest reaching out to your other Walmart contacts inside of the Walmart organization. So reach out to your RM and be like, hey, I haven't heard back from so-and-so in a while. If you do not hear back from them, then I would suggest asking the Walmart supplier support group. I think there's also an app in Retail Link where you can get that information. it will tell you who your buyer is, but it may not necessarily give you their contact information. So if you wanted to reach out to them, I think one of those other three resources that I mentioned would probably be your best bet. So I'll make sure to link to that. If you guys are not familiar with the Walmart Supplier Support Group on Facebook, that is a fantastic resource. You guys should get on it today. So what that is a private group on Facebook that you can go and join. It has over 11,000 I guess users now, and feel free to go and post questions, search in there for resources. It's a great resource for suppliers, Walmart suppliers. I know that we personally use it all the time. So go and check that out. I'll link to that as well as Buyer Connect, and hopefully that's a good place for you to go and figure out who your buyer is if it's changed.
Yes, I think you said it great. Just go in Walmart Supplier Support Group and crowdsource that. Hey, who's the buyer for craft supplies or department, blah, blah, blah. And usually there's someone who answers in like 30 minutes at least.
Perfect. I'm not seeing any other questions, so I will link that. Oh, here we go. Do you have any resources for ASN status or troubleshooting? Do you want to kind of talk about that, Ellie?
Yeah, so the first place to look for ASN troubleshooting is the SWEP dashboard. You can actually kind of start to click in on some of your ASN issues, and then work with, some people use third-party like ASN providers. If that's what you're doing, work with them to get clarity if there are root cause issues. And if you're sending those yourself, I think starting with the SWEP dashboards, drilling down into why some of those are not downloading or if they're not receiving, I'm making sure that that setup is clear and being sent in a timely fashion. I think that would be my first. And then I know Walmart Supplier Academy has lots of resources about ASN. So that would be my second point.
Which phase ASNs are in SWEP, and I can send that webinar.
Yeah, it is in phase 1.
Phase 1. All right, I will pull that up, check that webinar out. Oh, and we have an article. Ooh,
Yes.
Okay, Maria, here's the article. Let me grab that recording for you. And I think that is it. I haven't seen anything else come through. So
yeah, sweet. Well, I'll just point to some of our resources. These are under resources on SupplierWiki. And then Melodie, thank you for joining us today. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to contact us. And you can also find us at supplypike.com.
Perfect, right on time. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.